Hello, everybody. This is Ralph Martin, the founder of RJ Quality Consulting. And in this video, I want to talk about ISO 17025 calibration requirements, specifically as they pertain to testing laboratories. Right now, I'm on my blog article in rjqualityconsulting.com. And this article goes into all of the details that pertain to the calibration requirements for ISO 17025 for testing laboratories. This is not applicable for calibration laboratories, although there are a lot of similarities. But in this article, I'm specifically talking about the ISO 17025 calibration requirements for a testing laboratory. And what I like to do with really all of my videos, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Ralph Martin, and I am a certified ISO 17025 auditor for a very large accreditation body known as PJLA, or Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation Incorporated. And I am also a quality expert. I have been in the realm of quality management since 1991. I have worked for many different companies in quality management, and I have also worked as a analytical chemist for about 20 years and was a lab manager for a very large chemical manufacturing company for about 15 of those 20 years. And I am very familiar with ISO 17025, and throughout my career, I have also been auditing laboratories, including FDA labs. So I was the main auditor for 14 of the FDA food and drug labs in the United States. And I am very experienced with ISO 17025. And it's good to get a perspective from somebody who has been on both sides of the auditee and the auditor. So I do know what ISO 17025 auditors look for. And in the area of calibration, I would say this is the number one area that has generated the most number of nonconformities within your accreditation, either initial assessments or your reaccreditation assessments, and in many cases, surveillance assessments. I would say the number one a number of nonconformances are generated within section 6.4 and section 6.5 of the standard. So that being said, one of the things I like to do when I do these videos is talk about the requirements right from the ISO 17025 standard itself and walk you through the process just to show you what the expectations are for ISO 17025 calibration requirements for testing labs. So what I'll do is start with the standard, and I'm really starting with section 6.4. So really calibration is discussed in a few different sections of the standards, mainly section 6.4 and 6.5, and also a little bit of section 6.6 when we talk about externally provided products and services, which is really where, if you're hiring a calibration vendor or somebody to do calibrations on site or off site or what have you, there are some requirements in section 6.6. And there are also requirements in really section 7.8 as it pertains to generating, this is where for a testing laboratory, it's where you would, the rules governing what you would put on your test report to your customers. But it is also the section for calibration companies that they're required to put certain elements, or there are clause element requirements that talk about what needs to be put onto a calibration certificate for a ISO 17025 calibration provider. And we'll talk about that as well. So starting right out of the gate, when it comes to section 6.4 of the standard equipment, it talks a lot about, you shall have access to the equipment, and this is mainly referring to equipment maintenance, but we're not discussing equipment maintenance. And in section 6.4, we don't really get into calibration until we get really to section 6.4.6. This is where calibration is, which is a vague term. I won't get into that too much because I'll talk forever about this. But because the term calibration is oftentimes misunderstood, especially within testing laboratories. Not so much calibration laboratories, but for testing laboratories, the word calibration can have various meanings. But we want to focus on the requirements of the IEC 17025 standard as it pertains to the calibration requirements. So first of all, we have section 6.4.6, which tells you that measurement equipment shall be calibrated when. This is a shall statement. This means that these requirements pertain to all measuring equipment. So anything that gives you a measurement result is these requirements fall into. So first of all, measuring equipment shall be calibrated when the measurement accuracy or measurement uncertainty affects the validity of the reported result. And this is an and/or statement. And/or calibration of the equipment is required to establish the metrological traceability of the reported results. And this is really key here. So when I talked about the definition of calibration, calibration as it pertains to ISO IEC 17025 is really centered along measurement traceability and the idea that there shall be no unbroken chain of traceability to the SI units through NIST. That is really what calibration is all about. It's all about ensuring that there is not a broken chain and that we go directly to the SI units through NIST without breaking that chain. Breaking that chain can include things like having a thermometer that is not calibrated or doesn't have a calibration certificate associated with it, or it doesn't point to one that is calibrated through documentation. That would be an example of an unbroken or a broken chain. And that would result in a nonconformance because you broke the chain. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. But the idea of calibration is to focus on the fact that there shall be no unbroken chain of traceability to the SI units through NIST. If you can get that into the idea in your head, then you will understand everything there is to know about calibration. I know that sounds simplistic, but it is very true. So we want to look at calibration of the equipment is required to establish the metrological traceability of the reported result. And section 6.4.7 says the laboratory shall establish a calibration program that shall be reviewed and adjusted as necessary in order to maintain confidence in the status of calibration. And then one big one that's oftentimes misunderstood is section 6.4.8, all equipment requiring calibration. And all equipment that requires calibration are measurement devices. Anything that gives you a measurement result is considered an item that you need to have a calibration program for. So all equipment requiring calibration or which has a defined period of validity shall be labeled, coded, or otherwise identified to allow the user of the equipment to readily identify the status of calibration or period of validity. So what does that mean? That means that in reality, if an analyst in your lab doesn't know whether the piece of equipment they are about to use has been calibrated, then you have violated this section of the standard. The intent of this section is that when an analyst is going to use a piece of equipment that gives a measurement result, that they are ensured that that device has been calibrated. Now, if that analyst is trained to review a logbook, to check before they proceed, to indicate that it, yes, has been calibrated, then a logbook is okay for documentation. Notice it doesn't say that the device has to be labeled. It says the device shall be labeled, coded, or otherwise identified to allow the user of the equipment to readily identify the status of calibration or period of validity. That means the analyst needs to know, hey, has this been calibrated, and when is it due for its next calibration? However that needs to be communicated to the analyst, that's what needs to be documented. So, whether that means that a pipette has to have a label on it, that an analyst can look at the pipette and go, yep, it's been calibrated and it's not due 5 minutes from now. That's what this intent of this section of the standard means. If you have a thermometer and it's not practical to put a little calibration sticker on it, then if the analyst is trained to check a logbook before using the thermometer, then that's certainly okay to have that documented in the logbook, as long as the analyst is trained to do that, and that that it is readily identify the status of calibration or period of validity. So now that we've covered section 6.4.8, we're going to move on to more of the standard that is relevant to the requirements of ISO 17025 calibration. Now we get into metrological traceability, section 6.5, and you see right here, and I've repeated this before, section 6.5.1, and this is a shall statement, so we wanted to key in on shall statements on the standard. The laboratory shall establish and maintain metrological traceability of its measurement results by means of a documented, unbroken chain of calibrations, each contributing to the measurement uncertainty, linking them to an appropriate reference. So what does this mean? This means that there shall be no unbroken chain of traceability to the SI units through NIST, and that chain is documented by a calibration certificate of some sort, whether that be a calibration certificate provided by a calibration vendor or provider who comes out to your facility and calibrates your balance or pipette or thermometer or whatever it is. And that on that calibration certificate, there is an uncertainty of measurement established on the calibration certificate. Now, we'll get a little bit later, we'll talk about what goes onto a calibration certificate and what is required to be on a calibration certificate for specifically an ISO 17025 accredited testing lab. You can't just go hire any willy-nilly calibration company and just issue you a piece of paper that says it's been calibrated. That's not good enough for an ISO 17025 accredited testing lab. We need to have a calibration certificate that gives us an expanded uncertainty of measurement and all the requirements that ISO 17025 requires to be on a calibration certificate, which is why, for the most part, the calibration provider needs to be an accredited lab. But not only that, that accredited lab needs to be furnishing you a 17025 calibration service, because keep in mind, not all accredited laboratories service only 17025 customers. They have other customers. They have customers that are ANSI certified. They have customers that are not ISO 17025. So they could provide calibration services at a lower cost, of course, for companies that don't care about ISO 17025. So be careful. Just because a laboratory is accredited to ISO 17025 doesn't mean that the service they are providing you is in accordance with ISO 17025 and that their calibration certificate states that. So be careful, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about section 6.6 of the standard. But first of all, I want to talk about section 6.5.2. This is the heart. This is it. This is the heart of calibration requirements for or ISO 17025 calibration requirements. And I want to stress here that these are or statements. These are not and statements, and these are not and or statements. They are or statements. The laboratory shall ensure that measurement results are traceable to the international system of units through A or B or C, not A and B, not A and or B, A or B or C. And I'm stressing that for a very good reason. So you can ensure that measurement results are traceable to the international system of units through A, calibration provided by a competent laboratory. This is your ISO 17025 calibration laboratory. You'll notice note 1, calibration laboratories fulfilling the requirement of this document, meaning ISO 17025, are considered to be competent. That means if you hire a calibration provider, they have to be ISO 17025 accredited. Okay, so we got that out of the way. I can't tell you how many nonconformances I've written for seeing calibration certificates, and when I asked, is this calibration company ISO 17025? And I get that blank stare like, oh, you mean they have to be? Yes, they do. It says right here, laboratories fulfilling the requirements of this document are considered to be competent. Calibration provided by a competent laboratory. A. Or B. Certified values of certified reference materials provided by a competent producer with stated metrological traceability to the SI. Note 2, reference material producers fulfilling the requirements of ISO 17034 are considered to be competent. What does that mean? That means that you are using a certified reference material as your known, as your standard, and the certificate of analysis for that reference material is traceable to the SI units through NIST by a ISO 17034 competent producer. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences between A and B and cases where a lab typically will do A and B. So you hire a calibration company to come out and calibrate your balance. You hire, Mettler or Sartorius or somebody like that. They come out and they calibrate your balance once a year. So they come out, they calibrate your balance, they give you a piece of paper, and the calibration certificate has the expanded uncertainty on it, and they have their little ISO 17025 logo. You're all good to go. You have met the requirements of section 6.5.2. And that's A, only A, but it meets the requirements. But a year later, so this is May 1st, 2024. So May 1st, 2024, Mettler comes out, checks your balance, everything's good, gives you a certificate, it's good for a year. Then they come back May 1st, 2025, and you're in your office, you're the quality manager, and Mettler comes in and says, hey, I'm done. Here's your piece of paper. Here's your calibration certificate. It's all good now. Oh, by the way, when I checked the calibration when I just got here, it was not in calibration, so I adjusted it, but no worries, everything's good now. You now have 1 year's worth of data that is suspect if you're using a balance and that balance impacts your test results. Because you don't know if that balance went out of calibration on 5/2 of 2024 or 4/30 of 2025. You don't know. You only know that it was good when he left last year and it wasn't good when he came here and now it's good again. So you have a year's worth of data that is in question. Did you meet the requirements of the standard? Well, yeah, but it's questionable throughout a whole year whether the data that you were producing from that balance were valid. That's what that means. So you go out and you buy reference weights for your balance so that that sort of thing doesn't happen, and that you might ask the question, well, how often should I check my balance with my reference weights that are produced by a ISO 17034 competent producer? So that means the C of A for the reference weights should say there should be a little logo that says ISO 17034 by whatever company that they are accredited from. If you have anything other than that, you are not in compliance with section B 6.5.2. Just to let you know. But if you did A, you'd probably get away with having a calibration on your balance if you only use your balance once a year. But most labs use their balance more than once a year. So that, now let's say you decide that you want to use reference weights for your balance once a month. So you check your balance on, today's 5/1/2024. Everything was good on 5/1/2024, and on 6/1/2024, it wasn't good and it was out. Your 1 gram didn't weigh 1 gram in accordance with the uncertainty of measurement. So you call a calibration company to come out and fix your balance. But now you have a month's worth of data that's in question. So how often should you check the reference weights of your balance? Well, that depends on how often you use your balance. If you use it every day, then I would recommend that you check your balance every day. So that being said, if you were to only do B, let's say, and you didn't do A, are you meeting the requirements of section 6.5.2? Yes, because this is an or statement. The laboratory shall ensure that measurement results are traceable to the international system of units through A or B or C. C is the direct realization of the SI units ensured by comparison, directly or indirectly, with national or international standards. Meaning, if let's say you have 5 incubators and it's really expensive to buy 5 reference thermometers produced by an ISO 17034 company, so you only buy one, but you compare the other 4 with the one, and you have good records showing that it's within the uncertainty of measurement. So thermometer A was compared to thermometer B, which was we had a certificate of analysis stating that it was a traceable thermometer, and now we're doing C as our calibration for our thermometers. That would meet the requirements of 6.5.2, A or B or C. So I hope that helps. That's kind of, this applies to any reference standard, whether it is a solid, liquid, or gas. So if this is a HPLC, or let's say a mass spec, and you're doing metal analysis, and you're using your 4 metals as your certified reference material to check to make sure that your ICP-MS is working correctly, and those certified reference materials are produced by a competent producer, meaning they're ISO 17034 accredited, then, and that's what you're doing every time you run a unknown on your ICP-MS, you are indeed meeting the requirements of section 6.5.2 as it pertains to calibration. So this is where the term calibration starts getting fuzzy, and you're like, well, I don't calibrate the ICP-MS. Well, actually, you do check the measurement traceability of your ICP-MS, so you are meeting the requirements of calibration. So then it kind of gets into the weeds of, when metrological traceability to the SI units is not technically possible, the laboratory shall demonstrate metrological traceability to an appropriate reference that is. And this is where we start using a competent producer, and we do the indirect way of checking measurement traceability. So I want to talk a little bit now about section 6.6 of the standard that would pertain to calibration, and that is where we are talking about section 6.6.2. And I want you to understand this, because I also give a lot of nonconformances for this part of the standard as well. And that is when we talk about you used a calibration company that was indeed accredited to ISO 17025, but your calibration certificate doesn't state that it is. That would happen for 2 main reasons. One, they gave you the wrong calibration certificate, and sometimes calibration vendors are a little tricky that way. They might even ask you for more money. But if you paid for an ISO 17025 calibration, you should get on the calibration certificate what you paid for. If you didn't, then um, yell and scream and get your money back or have them give it to you. The other reason why it could be a certificate that doesn't state what it should state is because you didn't ask that company to provide you a calibration service in accordance with ISO 17025. Yes, the company is accredited to ISO 17025, but you didn't ask for that service. So you want to look at section, and it's your fault if you don't do that. So, and the reason I say it's your fault is because in the standard it says the laboratory shall have a procedure and retain records for A, B, C, or D. Um, One of them, C, we'll focus on because this pertains to calibration. The laboratory shall have a procedure and retain records for ensuring that externally provided products and services conform to the laboratory's established requirements or, when applicable, to the relevant requirements of this document, meaning ISO 17025, before they are used or directly provided to the customer. So if you go to Tromner or to some other company and you bought reference weights and they were not the right reference weights, you might say, but Tromner's ISO 17034, I got ripped off, whatever. It could be that you didn't buy the right weights. You didn't buy the ISO 17034 produced weights, even though Tromner is ISO 17034 accredited. You have to specifically tell the vendor what you want. If that was the case and you bought the wrong weight set, then you violated section 6.6.2, 6.6.2, section C of the standard. Same is true with the calibration provider. You hired Mettler to calibrate your balance, and they gave you a certificate, and then you call them up later when you're being audited, and you say, give me the right certificate. You gave me the wrong one. Mettler could go, yeah, but I can't do that because when we came out and calibrated your balance, we didn't use the type of equipment that is required for an ISO 17025 calibration. So we can't give you a calibration certificate that says ISO 17025 on it because you didn't ask us for that. And oftentimes that is the reason why you will see a calibration certificate that does not have an expanded uncertainty of measurement on it, because the calibration service didn't have the equipment to provide that for you because maybe perhaps you didn't ask them for a calibration under the requirements of ISO 17025. And the last section I'll talk about is section 7.8, which is talking about what goes on to a calibration certificate. So section 7.8 talks about, for testing labs, what you need to put on your test report. But then there's also the requirements of what goes on a calibration report, which is all, this section 7821 is what goes on a test, calibration, and sampling report. So if you're a calibration lab, you have to put all these things on here. But if you are a calibration lab and not a testing lab, you also need to put in the requirements that pertain specifically to a calibration lab, which would be section 7.8.4. And these are specific requirements for calibration certificates, and you'll notice the measurement uncertainty of the measurement result presented in the same unit as that of the measurand and or in term relative to measurand, e.g. Percent. Environmental conditions need to be on there. The statement identifying how the measurements and metrological traceability are done, and then all of these things that are required for calibration certificates. If you purchased from a vendor a calibration in accordance with ISO 17025, and they don't furnish all of these items in the standard, and then when you ask them for it, they want more money, that that's crap. You If you paid for an ISO 17025 calibration, they are obligated to give you everything on that calibration report that is in section 7.8 of the standard. So do your due diligence, understand what the requirements are for that calibration certificate, and tell that calibration company that you demand the right calibration certificate. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. This is some of the things I run up against when I audit labs for the ISO 17025 calibration requirements. I know this video was a little long, but I really wanted to hit home with the ISO 17025 calibration requirements for testing labs to help you understand what the auditor is going to look for. They are going to look for calibration certificates that have a logo that say 17025, and that calibration was done in accordance with ISO 17025. If you have pipettes and they're not calibrated, you will get a nonconformance. If you have timers that are measurement results and they are not calibrated, you will get a nonconformance. If you have a calibration certificate for a measurement device and it's not by a competent provider, you will get a nonconformance. So don't be surprised when you get one, or say you didn't know because you watched my video. So if you ever need any help with anything ISO 17025 related, feel free to comment on my blog, and you can also sign up for a free consultation. I will give you a 45-minute free consultation on anything related to your ISO 17025 needs, or for anything, for any ISO needs for that matter. Just there should be a image down below this video to book a free consultation with me, and it's 100% free, no obligations, and you can book a 45-minute consultation with me. So that, my friends, is it. I hope you have an awesome day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.